So, what is the most amazing pile driving story you've ever seen or heard about in your life? Well, I'm about to tell you about the greatest pile driver that ever lived, James Nasmyth. In 1843, a brilliant inventor by the name of James Nasmyth invented the steam pile driver hammer. His first machine had an 8,000-pound ram and could hit 80 blows a minute. He took his new machine to Devonport to compete with the other pile drivers. He drove a 70-foot long pile, 18 inches square, in 4.5 minutes, while the conventional method required 12 hours. Okay, let me just jump in here and say this is the most amazing pile driving happening that has ever happened on planet Earth. Can you imagine the Royal Navy in 1843 goes to James and says, "Hey, look, we love your invention of the forging hammer." He invented a steam-powered forging hammer that could smash steel and forge it. And now they're asking him to take that technology and bring it down to the docks and drive pile, which he does. Now, keep in mind, this is July 1845. There's no rubber air steam hoses. He comes out with this leader system and this hammer with these pipes and swivels getting all the steam up to this hammer. It just must have looked like it came from SpaceX, for God's sakes. But in the process, all of the pilebucks are laughing at him. Now, the pilebucks had been using steam winches to lift rams, but nobody had ever lifted a ram with an air cylinder and dropped it, let alone accelerate it downward. So here comes James, and they're starting to laugh at him. And the Navy pulls out two pilings and says, "Okay, we're going to find out who can drive faster. Ready, set, go." And James just kicks total ass and completely revolutionizes the world of pile driving. And no man has ever moved the scales as much as this man has in pile driving and a lot of other things, as you'll see. But okay, now let me just say this again. James Nasmyth drove that pile in 4.5 minutes, while these pile bucks that were making fun of him, they drove all day long and into the next day and still didn't do what he did in 4.5 minutes. That is why James Nasmyth is my hero. Anyway, let's continue the story. After that day, on July 3rd, 1845, the old steam drop hammer's days were certainly numbered. If you're a pilebuck and you don't know the history of this guy, you should study him right away. He is the Elon Musk of his days, a real unbelievable inventor and my hero. This great pile-driving man of the past went on to invent the shaper, the planer, the hydraulic press, the rotary flexible shaft, a machine for cutting grooves in metal, self-adjusting bearings. God, I wish I could have met this guy. I mean, he would take an egg and stick it underneath his forging hammer and show how he could come down really hard and stop before hitting that egg just right on the top of the egg. I mean, this guy was cocky and inventive and he just would have been a cool pile driving guy to hang around. Anyway, let's look at some of his other inventions and what he did. He went on to sell more than 500 hammers that were used around the world. Many of the major bridges in Europe were built with his hammers. James retired at the age of 48 and moved to Kent, England, to a neighborhood that he renamed Hammerfield. James switched from pile hammers to studying the moon and is the inventor of the focus telescope. Back in those days, it was impossible to photograph through a telescope, so he took what he saw on the moon and made plaster of Paris models of it and then photographed that to show people what he saw on the moon. There's even a crater on the moon named after this guy. Seriously, this guy was a pile-driving god and a genius of his time. When I got into the pile driving business back in 1977, there were still air hammers, steam hammers working everywhere, and there's just nothing like the sound of one of those machines. I'm going to end this video by highly recommending that anyone that wants to learn more about James Nasmyth buy his biography. He wrote a book, and in that book, it tells more details about the story that I've only briefly highlighted, but many, many other amazing stories. This guy, by far, is the most amazing pile driver in the world. I mean, look, even I've got more than 45 patents, and I have revolutionized a lot of pile driving equipment in my time, but there's no way I would even remotely compare to the accomplishments of James Nasmyth. And if you want to give a genuine gift to any pile driver, buy his book and hand it over and ask them to read it. It will be the most amazing read ever with regards to pile driving equipment and pile driving itself. Thank you for watching.